If you only have time for one thing today, this needs to be it. Get out from behind your desk and get into the classrooms. Every great school leader knows that the heartbeat of your school isn't in your inbox, it's in the classrooms. And in this video, I'm going to share 4 reasons why being visible and engaged in classrooms is the key to your lasting impact as a school leader. If you'd like more strategies like this, simply download the PD Unlocked Playbook, 10 Power Moves to Unlock Your Leadership Impact. It is your shortcut to leading your school with focus and confidence. Click that link below to grab your copy. Now let's take a closer look at where your leadership matters the most. It's easy to think that office work, those administrative tasks, parent calls, teacher questions are the top priority because, let's be honest, they take up the most of our time. But here's a surprise. While those tasks do need to be completed and calls need to be answered, they're not always the best use of our time, especially for prioritizing mission-driven schools. Getting into the classrooms is the single most important priority for you as a school leader. That's where your leadership makes the greatest impact. So let me tell you a story. I was in my 2nd year as a school principal when one afternoon I got a phone call from one of my superintendents. We were talking about a committee that I was serving on, and then almost as an afterthought, she asked me how often I was getting into the classrooms. I literally froze because the truth was I wasn't getting into the classrooms often at all. Like you probably are, I was buried in paperwork, meetings, and phone calls. So I told her honestly, not that often. Her response was this: "That's okay, you're a newer principal. It will come with time." At the moment, I felt relieved, but later I realized that that was the single worst piece of advice I could have ever received. My job wasn't to be the office manager. My job was to be the leader of learning at my school. And the result of that advice, I was given permission to not go into the classrooms. And that permission quickly turned into a habit, one that kept me out of my classrooms and in the dark. The truth was I was intimidated. Many of my teachers had been teaching for decades, and some could have been my teachers. Who was I as a young principal to walk in and observe them? That fear made it easy for me to justify staying in my office, and now I had a legitimate reason to avoid the most important part of my job. What I needed to hear that day was, drop what you're doing, go walk through every classroom, and then call me back and tell me what you saw. Since that lesson, it has become a central theme in my coaching with school leaders, both as a superintendent and now as a consultant. Because if you're not in the classrooms, you are truly not leading learning and you are not leading your schools. Now you might be wondering, why does getting into the classrooms matter so much? You do have a lot of work to do, right? Well, it's not just about being visible or checking a box of getting those observations done. It's about knowing your school, and I mean really knowing it, because you can't lead what you truly don't understand. Certainly you can read reports, lesson plans, and analyze test data, but none of it tells you the full story. The truth of your school lives in its classrooms. It's how teachers teach, students learn, and how both respond to the culture you're building. That's why I always tell leaders you don't know your school until you've seen it in action. Classroom visits aren't about presence, they're about perspective. They're how you see what's working, what needs attention, and where your leadership is making the biggest impact. So let's break it down. Here are 4 ways classroom visits help you to know your school on a deeper level. Reason 1, know the real story. Because formal observations give you snapshots, but genuine insight comes from seeing learning as it happens every single day. Reason 2, know your people. Because understanding your teacher's daily work builds trust faster than any meetings or memos ever could. Reason 3, know your students. Because your visibility shapes how they define leadership and what they believe your leadership stands for. Reason 4, know it's real. Because data shows patterns, but firsthand experience reveals truth. These 4 reasons are what separate management from leadership. They help you to move from running a school to truly leading it. And if you haven't already downloaded the PD Unlocked Playbook, click that link below. It's packed with practical and proven strategies to help you to put these ideas in action right away. Let's start with reason 1, knowing the real story. If you really want to understand what's happening in classrooms, you can't rely on only required formal observations. And don't get me wrong, those twice-a-year observations are important, and can give helpful information, like how well a teacher can plan and certainly what they're capable of, especially when they're handled thoughtfully and followed up with meaningful conversation. But truthfully, they only show a sliver of what's actually going on. Teachers know you're coming and pull out all the stops. The anchor chart is perfect, the engagement strategy is on point, and students are performing at their absolute best. You observe and think, wow, that was incredible. And it probably was, but it's not the full picture of learning. As a principal, I did the same thing. I completed every required observation. I scheduled them in advance, spent the required 20 to 45 minutes in the classroom observing, and I wrote those detailed notes and left with what I thought was a clear picture of teaching and learning in my school. But it wasn't. I was seeing snapshots and not stories. The lessons were well planned and the engagement was high, but something felt a little too polished and predictable. It wasn't until I added informal visits that the picture of my school began to deepen. I'd step in for just a few minutes with no checklist, just my curiosity. That's when I started seeing the real classroom. I noticed how transitions worked, how students responded when a lesson didn't go perfectly, and how teachers adjusted on the fly to those teachable moments, and how learning really lived in those rooms from the day to day. What surprised me most was how those short and informal visits transformed everything: my understanding, my feedback, and even my relationships with teachers. The formal observations gave me compliance, and the informal visits, they gave me context. And that context changed how I led. Great teaching has good days and it has bad days. Students have energy spikes and they have slumps. Learning is messy, dynamic, and it's alive. That's why being present consistently matters. It's not about catching teachers at their best. It's about understanding the truth of instruction, seeing what's typical and not just what's rehearsed. Think of it this way. When you look at student data, you don't rely on a single benchmark or a national test score to assume that that's the whole story. Of course not. You know those assessments are just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. They show you what students know, but not how they know it, how they learned it, or what might have gotten in their way. The same principle applies to classroom visits. The more touch points you have, the clearer the picture becomes. Each visit adds another data point, not just numbers on a spreadsheet, but human data, the tone, the energy, the confidence, and the relationships. And that's where your visibility becomes powerful. When you walk into a classroom, the atmosphere shifts. Teachers notice, students notice, and the entire culture of the school notices. Your engagement communicates more than observation. It communicates value. It tells teachers what happens here matters. It tells students learning is important enough for me to see it firsthand. And it tells your community our mission isn't just written on the wall, it's lived in every classroom. The power of your engagement goes far beyond evaluation. It sends a signal of belief, accountability, and partnership in learning. It reminds everyone in the building that you didn't just lead from behind your desk, you lead from where learning actually happens, in the classrooms. Reason 2 is to know your people, because leadership is about relationships. When you show up, you're telling teachers their work matters, their teaching matters, and most importantly, they matter more than the paper on your desk. You can say instruction is our top priority until you're blue in the face, but stepping into the classroom proves it in a way words never can. Being there consistently tells your teams, I value you and I am in this with you. When I finally started visiting classrooms regularly, I was nervous and honestly I was intimidated, but I was determined to correct my mistakes. I braced myself for resistance or awkwardness. I thought teachers would tighten up or feel judged, but what I got was completely different. A veteran teacher stopped me one day and said, it means a lot that you come into the classrooms not to evaluate, but actually see what we do every day. We work hard and it feels good to know that we matter. That moment changed everything for me. I realized teachers weren't dreading my visits. They were actually craving connection, recognition, and validation, that their daily efforts mattered. It reminded me that leadership isn't about evaluation, it's about relationships. And relationships communicate value in a way no email, memo, or meeting ever could. That same lesson showed up years later when I was coaching a new principal who was struggling to rebuild trust in her school. Teachers described her as nice but distant. She was supportive and responsive and always prepared for meetings, but she led from her office. Everything she did was through email or meetings, and she couldn't figure out why her teachers seemed to be disengaged. So we made one small change. She committed to being visible. Every morning, she started her day in the classrooms, not for long, just about 15 minutes at a time. She smiled at students, complimented lessons, and occasionally sat in with groups to ask what they were learning. Within weeks, things began to shift. Teachers started stopping by her office to share ideas instead of complaints, and conversations that used to be defensive became open and reflective. 6 months later, one of her most skeptical teachers came to her and said, "You being in our rooms, it's made a difference. It feels like you actually see us now." And that's the moment the culture started to turn. Because when you show up consistently, you're not just walking into classrooms, you're walking into relationships. You're building credibility one moment at a time, and those moments become the foundation for every conversation, every professional learning plan, and every difficult conversation that follows. Your connection tells teachers, "I'm with you in this," and that message changes everything. Reason 3 is to know your students, because every time you step into the classroom, you influence how they see leadership, learning, and themselves. If the only time students see or hear you is from over the intercom or at assemblies or when someone's being sent to the office, they start to associate leadership with correction and not connection. To them, you're the person who enforces the rules or delivers announcements, not someone who's a part of their learning journey. But when they see you crouched beside a student puzzling through a math problem, joining in a group conversation in English, or even laughing when a science project goes awry, that story changes. You're not just running a school, you're a part of it. They see you as a leader who's curious, human, and genuinely invested in how they're doing. I'll never forget the first time this truth hit me. I was visiting a math class and I stopped beside a student working on a problem, and I asked him to tell me about how he was approaching that problem. And he looked up at me and he said, "I thought principals only came in when someone was in trouble." His comment stopped me. At that moment, I realized he didn't see me as a part of his learning world. To him, I was the person who made announcements and handled discipline, not someone who cared about what he was learning. That encounter reminded me that students build their picture of leadership from what they see, not from all of the things that they handle behind the scenes. If they don't see us in classrooms, they assume that that's not where we belong. That engagement reminded me that I needed to start visiting the school and classrooms just to connect, during projects, small groups, and even in the hallway. I'd sit beside kids and I'd ask them what they were proud of, and I'd listen when they told me what was hard. Slowly, something changed. Students started greeting me from across the courtyard. They'd stop me in the breezeway to tell me about their weekend or their English project. They began to see me not as a rule enforcer, but a part of their school journey, as a part of their lives. And I've seen the same realization hit school leaders that I coach. One high school principal I worked with started every assembly the same way, by addressing what students were doing wrong. Dress code violations, tardies, cell phones, behavior in the hallways. Her goal was accountability, but over time, she realized it was shaping how students saw her as a person who only showed up to correct. So we made a small change, and instead of using assemblies to point out problems, she began using them to highlight learning and small wins across the school. And at the same time, she committed to visiting a few classrooms every day. No notes, no walkthrough form, just observations. Within weeks, the energy shifted. Students who once rolled their eyes when she took the mic started to listen. They'd say hello when she entered a room and shared with her what they were up to. Teachers noticed it too. Students weren't bracing for correction anymore. They were eager to share what they were learning. The students just didn't behave differently. They believed differently. They began to see leadership as more as someone who notices them and celebrates them and invests in them, and not just someone who calls them out when they've done something wrong. That's what visibility does. It builds connection. And over time, those small moments add up. Students begin greeting you and sharing what they're proud of, and even opening up about difficult situations. They see you as approachable and not distant, someone who's for them and not just over them. And that changes everything about how you respond to your leadership and the tone of your school. And last but not least is reason number 4, knowing what's real. Because you can't lead from spreadsheets alone. You have to lead from what's actually happening in the classrooms. We all know to look at data, but numbers only tell part of the story. Remember those national test results we talked about earlier? Reports and dashboards can tell you part of the story, but the richest insights come from actually being in the classrooms, watching body language, noticing where students light up, and seeing how teachers adapt in real time. You start to understand not just what's being taught, but how learning actually lives in your building. That kind of context, no spreadsheet will ever capture it. Numbers can show you trends, but engagement shows you truth. Let me tell you about a principal I was coaching who couldn't quite figure out why his SAT scores were stuck. On paper, everything seemed solid. Teachers were working hard, lessons looked engaging, and students were busy. But when we dug deeper, we realized the issue wasn't effort, it was alignment. The problem showed up in what I like to call the 3 T's: time, text, and teacher, with text relating to standards. The teachers weren't spending enough time engaging with the standards that were being assessed. The text wasn't fully aligned to the assessment standards. And finally, the teachers, through no fault of their own, were teaching well-crafted lessons that didn't connect to what the students would later be measured on. So we started walking the classrooms together and looking specifically for alignment: what was being taught, how it was being assessed, and how both connected back to the standards. And within a few visits, the picture became clear. The lessons were thoughtful and creative, but they weren't always focused on the right targets. That discovery changed everything, and instead of pushing for more test prep, the principal led her team in mapping instruction back to the standards and tightening the alignment between time, text, and teaching practice. In time, classroom conversations shifted. Teachers were intentionally planning with the standards, students were more grounded in the subject, and assessment results finally started to reflect the great teaching that was already happening in the school. That kind of clarity would never have come from behind a desk. Data showed the problem, but being in the classrooms revealed the cause. So I know your inbox is overflowing and the central office just dropped another report in your lap, and probably somebody is standing outside your office with that not-so-quick question that they need answered. In the middle of all of that, the idea of walking classrooms can feel impossible. But the thing is, being in the classroom isn't extra work. It's the mission. It's the foundation of your leadership. Think of it this way: the teaching that happens in your school is your product. I often tell school leaders to think about Apple. They produce one of the top phones in the world. And how do they stay on top? Because they're constantly watching what they make. They don't ignore their product, they refine it, they test it, they make it better every single day. Schools are no different. We are in the business of education, and our classrooms is where that business lives. If we say teaching and learning are at the heart of our mission, then we can't lead from outside the classroom. Being present is how we protect, improve, and sustain what we do every single day. Staying connected to teaching and learning is the compass that keeps every part of your leadership aligned to the mission. Every decision, every plan, and every meeting becomes stronger when it's grounded in what's really happening in the classrooms. Because when you walk through those doors, you're not stepping away from your work, you're stepping into the heart of it. You've just learned 4 important reasons for getting out from behind your desk and making classroom engagement the most important part of your day. Knowing what's real, because when you show up, not occasionally, but consistently, you don't just observe teaching, you influence, you shape the culture, you strengthen trust, and you build the clarity that every great school runs on. So let's pull this all together. Getting into the classrooms isn't an add-on to your leadership. It is leadership. It's the heartbeat of everything you do. Because when you're in the classrooms and truly engaged, you see the truth of your school. You see what's working and what needs attention and where your teachers and students shine. You lead from clarity and not assumption. And that's where your biggest impact begins. So here's your next steps. Download the free PD Unlocked playbook, the 10 power moves to unlock your leadership impact, using that link below. It's packed with practical and ready-to-use strategies to help you focus your energy on where it matters most. Getting out from behind your desk and inside the classroom where learning lives, so you can build a mission-driven school. And make sure you click like and subscribe to the channel, because this is just the start. In the next video, we're going to break down a simple system that gets you into the classroom automatically, even on the busiest of days. Because your school doesn't just need your decisions, it needs you vibrantly engaged. And the good news, building that kind of engagement is easier than you think. I'll see you in the next video.